Hi everyone, I'm Bill Cordero. Proud to say I was one of the founding faculty, the original 13 that Dr. Rush hired to start the university in '01. Nice to have a nice crowd here. We have a whole bunch of students. So I want to do a couple of things before we get to Scott, our speaker. One is just to welcome you and thank you for attending. Food doesn't hurt, I understand. And remind you that this is the first of a series of 3 speaker events that we have every semester. We have one in 2 weeks, October 17th. Marty Albertson, who was one of the founders of Guitar Center. The purpose of these speaker series, we call it, is very simple. It's to bring prominent people from the community and put them in front of our community here, and particularly our students. You'll gain insight from listening, I presume. And he's a lawyer, by the way. I always thank the Business Advisory Council. We have a couple of their members here. This is a group, most business schools have these a group of prominent community people that help me and advise me on certain curricular matters and other matters. They're the ones that first helped organize this program. I also want to thank, we're called the Martin B. Smith School of Business Economics. So I always acknowledge the Smith family. Bud Smith and his wife Martha gave the original endowment to the university in the late 90s, and their 4 daughters have been very supportive of the university in many ways. So we, in honor of them, we named the school out here. What we're going to have today is kind of a 2-part. First, Scott is going to give you about a 30-minute presentation on, he's already briefly, so it's going to be very interesting, on television and entertainment and how that's grown. And then we'll sit here and I'll ask him, if you've been here before, kind of questions about his background, how he got to where he was, and we'll amplify some of the topics that he's going to present. At the end, as usual, we'll put a microphone in the middle, and that's for Q&A, not for speeches, but for Q&A. So, you know me, I don't give a long introduction except to say, here's Scott Zolke, and he's going to take over. Thanks. I'm sitting here so I can see the slides.
I mean, I'll reserve your seat for you while you're gone. So what I'd like to do is give a very quick summary, like a history of TV and content, because today our industry is unlike anybody could have ever anticipated going back 50 years ago. Is that how content would be created, how it would be distributed, how you pay for it, who would get it, how you get it. So, you know, basically I just would like to get a sense. Are most people here, maybe I see some hands, on the artistic, who's here like artistic creative, like graphics, producers, artists, whatever? How many of you are business students or business people? Okay, so guess what? So all you artsy people, I'm going to give a little bit of the advantage to the business side. We'll still talk about the creative, but I think it's interesting because when television was initially created, if you will, medium, we only had 3 networks. And the only way you could receive television was you had to have like a rabbit ears antenna and get these signals that came over the air, but it was free. All you had to do was go buy a television set, plug it in, make sure your antenna was connected, and you could get whatever was being telecast. And that was typically news, soap operas, and I'll explain what soap operas were, and then the production community of studios would say, let's do half-hour sitcoms, or let's do 1-hour dramas. And as time evolved, the idea of what constituted a sitcom versus what constituted a drama got crossed because it became less about, well, is this supposed to be funny or is this supposed to be serious? And more about packaging the programming so it could travel. And by travel, I mean not just domestically, but I need to sell this internationally. Why? Because actors want to make more money. Writers and producers want to make more money. Directors want to make more money. holy mackerel, it's getting expensive to produce television, and I can only get so much from an advertiser to help pay the cost of producing this TV. So guess what I need to do? I need to go over to Europe and Australia and China and all these other countries, and I need to license these programs because everybody over there wants Western cultural product. Don't even get me started on Canadian, because what happened with our Canadian border is Canada got so interested over the years in seeing people get jobs in our industry that they started throwing all kinds of tax incentives, and the dollar was very strong against the Canadian dollar. So a lot of production during the 80s and 90s went to Canada and was done as Canadian content. And you'd ask, what the heck does this television show have to do with Canadian content? And there would typically be a Canadian actor that was in the show or in the movie, and they say, well, that's Canadian content. We have a Canadian actor. So the rules have been bent and played. So from the three networks we knew back when TV was in its infancy, that would be ABC, CBS, and NBC, there was this rush to create programming that would drive people, eyeballs, to watch TV. This is all before you could time shift programming, because advertisers would pay X number of dollars for every eyeball that was watching television, and then that money would go to help offset the cost of production. And back in those days, there were many different ways to get advertisers in the programming. The most historically relevant today was the integration. So in other words, you can integrate products into TV programming. So if anybody watch American Idol, you see Ford and you see Coca-Cola and obviously AT&T with the texting. That's not just ad buying, that's integration. Advertisers pay a ton of money for that. So back when TV was in its infancy, we saw soap operas, because Tide would be the main sponsor for these soap operas that lasted years and years and years. And many of the deals that were made between the studios that produced the programs and the advertisers that provided the money to help pay for the cost of production required at some point in a show that someone would sit with a box of Tide so that they could connect the fact that this product was paying for this show. The game shows that evolved in the 50s and 60s were all connected to sponsors, the advertisers. You'd see it right on the podium, and the host of every show would have like a brand sitting right across his podium. Or behind the participants in the game show, you'd see these huge logos for these advertisers, and this is how the different studios were able to pay for programming. Let's fast forward. In the 80s, now all of a sudden, Sony creates this obscure product that none of you use today, that some of you have probably never seen, called a Betamax. Panasonic produced its own VHS version, so you had Beta and you had VHS, and you had these clunky machines that to this day, I don't remember or understand how I ever got mine connected, because you had all these wires that had to go, one had to go to the cable outlet, and then come into the box, and then go into the TV set, and you could only record what you were actually watching. You couldn't record something that was on another channel, and then the quality stunk, and it was like, if you kept a cassette long enough, then the quality of the tape would get bad, so that you'd be watching a show a few months after you recorded it, and it would be, because the tape was degenerating over time. There was a huge lawsuit, because now in the 80s, the concept for you business people, and you creatives can ignore this because it doesn't mean anything, called deficit financing. And this became kind of the benchmark of how television was evolving. All of a sudden, the studios, and let me just explain the difference. You have television networks which are basically, on the broadcast side, today we have ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, and does anybody here ever watch the CW? Come on, girls, I know, yeah. Because you guys like those model shows and sappy vampire dramas and stuff like that. What you don't remember probably is that the CW used to be the WB and UPN, but they crashed and burned and realized the only way they could survive was to merge. So they got together, and it's a joint venture now between CBS, C, and Warner Brothers, W, the CW. And the problem with the CW now is nobody's watching either, so it's slowly crashing and burning. But ultimately, the reason that makes sense, and trust me, I'm going to connect this thought, because I said networks, studios. Okay, well, CBS is a network. Warner Brothers is a studio. Warner Brothers brings you shows like The Big Bang Theory, 2.5 Men, okay? CBS airs, Big Bang Series, 2.5 Men. But not on the CW, on CBS. So, the studios which produce and provide programs to the networks started to see the costs of producing this programming go through the roof. So far through the roof that what a network could pay as a license fee, because the network is the side that's driving the advertising revenue. The network goes out and sells, in a half-hour sitcom, sells 8 minutes of spots. Some of them are national, some of them are local. On the national side, the network keeps everything. On the local side, the station that you watch that network on keeps its share. Well, based on that model, the network reaches a level that says, I can't pay you any more money for your show, Mr. Studio, that you're producing for me. Studios at that point have to make a decision. Do we deficit finance this show? And if so, how much and how long? Classic example. When 2.5 Men initially launched with Charlie Sheen, before his meltdown, CBS was paying Warner Brothers exactly what it cost to produce that show. So it was a break even, and then Warner Brothers, the studio that produced the show, would take the show and distribute it internationally, would distribute it in syndication, to cable, all the off-network exploitation that I'll talk about in just a moment. And all that money would come into Warner Brothers. And so Warner Brothers is now making tens of millions of dollars in profit because 2.5 Men travels well. People thought it was a cute show, funny show. So Warner Brothers is getting rich. CBS isn't necessarily getting rich, but it's driving ratings. And the higher the ratings go, the more people are watching your network, and the more people that are watching your network, the more money you can charge advertisers to buy advertising on your network, so they start getting rich. So everybody's doing well until the cast, and this happens every time. 2 or 3 years into production, the cast goes, did you see what the network is making? Did you see what the studio is making? I quit. I'm not coming to the set for the season 4 unless you pay me some ridiculous amount of money. Season 1, 2.5 Men, Charlie Sheen made $75,000 an episode. In his last season, before Vegas, strippers, and a lot of booze and drugs, he was making $2.5 million an episode. 75,000, 2.5 million. Now that created a very big deficit for Warner Brothers. But Warner Brothers was still making money because the foreign demand and the cable demand and the syndication demand was huge. So they go sign Charlie to another couple-year deal, and then Charlie stops showing up for work because he's being distracted by all these other activities, and they throw him off the show. And they go get Ashton Kutcher, and they got to pay Ashton a ton of money. But they're still deficiting the show. What happened to the show? The ratings started to go down. So CBS started making less money. for its advertising. And Warner Brothers was making less money in syndication, so guess what? We have an announcement. This is the last season, which will happen now. Conversely, Big Bang Theory, ratings continue to go through the roof. CBS says, what's the most important night on network television? Thursday. Anybody want to guess why Thursday is the most important night on network television? Anybody want to wager a guess? Because what happens every weekend? Every weekend, movies get released. And so the studios spend tons of money advertising on television on Thursday nights because the weekend is coming and they want people to go to the movies. Because the studios that produce the TV programs also produce the movies that you go see in the theaters. So they're going to hit it both ways. Spend a ton of money promoting the fact that our movies are available over the weekend. So of course, now we move Big Bang Theory, which is the #1 sitcom on television on Thursday night because it drives big ratings. What do you think the cast of Big Bang Theory did just a couple months ago? They said, we're not coming to work. You guys are making all this money. We want more money. And so Warner Brothers had to write another humongous check, and only time will let us know whether that model is going to work and whether their ratings will continue to go through the roof or whether they'll kind of fall off and how that will all work. So the reason I try to connect all these dots is, again, those of you on the creative side, it's really money driven. I mean, you can talk about the passion people have for great content and, telling a great story, but at the end of the day, it's all driven by money. Okay, so let's go through the different types of content that drive people to watch television. There's news. News is cheap to produce and doesn't really draw a whole lot of eyeballs because you get the news on your smartphone. You don't need to watch a TV station for news. There's scripted, okay, sitcoms and dramas. There's unscripted. Oh. Unscripted has become the new beast in television because everybody wants to watch Real Housewives. Everybody wants to watch the Kardashians. Everybody wants to watch these shows where people make complete idiots out of themselves. And these shows are cheap to produce. And the reason they're cheap to produce is because the people that participate in these shows are morons. Anybody who has an ounce of self-respect doesn't go on a reality show. I'm sorry. They're paid scale, which for you creatives, you want to try to avoid scale. You want to get well above scale when you're working. So it costs nothing to produce these shows, but everybody who goes on either wants to be famous or has an agenda. So when you watch like a show like Kardashians or Real Housewives, the agenda is we have product that we sell. We sell perfume, or I have a restaurant, so I'm willing to basically work for nothing, be embarrassed and ridiculed on this reality show because it's going to drive people to buy my product. The Kardashians are famous for being famous. There's no substance to what they do, but their product business is through the roof. And I'm going to tell you something, I know Bruce Jenner, he should not go out in public. But he's selling product. So, but he's selling product. So these people make complete idiots out of themselves. But again, what I said earlier, it's all being driven by money. It's all being driven by money. So what we've seen is, we've seen the networks say, what's the common denominator of this? Common denominator is who watches television. And all of you like watching these reality shows because you can't make this stuff up. Like, you could get a bunch of writers in a room and say, let's just script something that makes no sense, and you'd say, well, that would never happen. And you're right. So you go to reality shows and stuff happens that nobody could ever consider would happen, and that makes great television. Then there's infomercials. If you've ever been up late at night No one takes the NBA Finals and says, let me watch it in a week. Or the NCAA, Final Four, or college bowl games, or even college games on the weekends. Sports has become the 10-ton gorilla, which has changed the dynamic in television. And as a result, we've seen three things happen. One, the rights fees that the networks pay to get sports programming have gone through the roof. And that has affected valuations on sports teams. And we've seen prices that make no sense for professional teams because of this television component. Two, it's created a means by which all the cable networks that we never, everybody has their whatever tiers of service you get from your pay TV provider. You get, I get all these networks, well, I don't get these networks. Well, what's happened is all these very niche sports networks have popped up, and the way the networks are creating a demand, let's talk about the Dodgers for a second, is by saying, we're going to go and we're going to pay some ridiculous amount of money to get the Dodgers. And we're going to put them on our network. And the fact that only 1/3 of the people in the Los Angeles television DMA, which is the designated market area that Nielsen uses for ratings, the fact that only 1/3 of the people can get it, tough. Let them, you, us, the consumer, go fight with our pay TV distributor and tell our pay TV distributor, you got to get the Dodgers channel. You got to get it because I can't see my Dodgers. And that has created a real drive to force people to beef at their pay TV providers to say, we need this network. Well, unfortunately, Time Warner, which owns the Dodger network, guessed wrong, and DirecTV and Dish and Cox and Charter and I don't know who else is out here, Verizon, AT&T, all said we're not paying. Because if we pay these ridiculous per month charges, we have to pass them on to our customers. And what's happened in the last 2 years that is a reversal of the trend of how people view television is people are cutting their pay TV deals. They're saying, you know what? I don't want Time Warner. I don't want, Cox, or I don't want Comcast. I'm going to go get a subscription on Netflix. Because everything I like, I can watch on Netflix. So we've evolved into what I'll broadly define as a VOD society. We're a video-on-demand society. Nobody really watches non-sports programming when it's offered up. Most people, either through your pay TV provider or your Netflix or Hulu, watch it when you want to watch it. And the other thing that's become popular, how many binge watchers do we have here? I mean, right? Give me a season, baby. I'm going to sit for 6 hours. Give me some big old tacos and beer, and I'm watching the whole season. Right there, 6 hours. Which is why sports is the unique beast in the room. As long as there's an appetite for sports programming in this country, you're going to continue to see the cable networks overpay. And by the way, let's talk about, when I say cable networks, if anybody here is a baseball fan, you'll know that we're now in the divisional series for the American League and the National League. Not a single game is on broadcast television. So for those people that don't have pay TV, you can't watch baseball because you got to have Fox Sports 1, which nobody knows where that is. You got to have Major League Baseball Network. I mean, because the Dodgers play tomorrow on Major League Baseball Network. Or on the American League, everybody's playing on TBS. TBS is typically reruns and some real sleazy dramas, and then they wouldn't cut a deal to get baseball. Why? Because that makes the pay TV distributors say, well, we got to make sure TBS is on our first tier, Because we're gonna they put NC2A basketball on it, and this is how the cable programmers are saying, this has really nothing to do with what we do, but it helps drive eyeballs because people watch sports in real time. The NBA playoffs, only the finals are on ABC. Everything else is on Turner, ESPN. I mean, that's been the push. So to kind of wrap things up, from a creative standpoint, you've got a number of different platforms that do well domestically, that also do well internationally. Typically, it's the costs of the studios producing reality programming drives big ratings domestically and is insanely popular internationally because, yes, the French and the Brits and the Aussies love to look at what morons, live in the United States. It's become great television, and again, it doesn't cost anything. Then you've got news, which completely has fallen off the chart because everybody's getting their news. This is, by the way, oh, here it is. This for me has become how I consume media. And I'm sure for a lot of you, it's a tablet, maybe it's your MacBook, but I mean, I can't remember, other than, being in a bar watching a sports event, the last time I actually sit down in front of a TV set. It's right here. And as we evolve into a digital landscape where everything is capable of being instantaneously consumed, the studios who produce the programming and the networks who currently distribute the programming understand this is the future. And it doesn't necessarily mean I've got to have a hit on CBS. As you know, YouTube has gone absolutely, bonkers with stuff that's YouTube. Google has cut these deals to put original programming right here. And there are advertisers who will pay for that original programming because they know people are going to watch it. But the thing that's driving the model right now is sports. And as long as, people have this appetite for sports, the advertisers, the networks, and the studios that produce these sporting events know this is one of the few, if any, types of content that are watched in real time, which means you're going to watch the commercials as opposed to, when you use your alternative distribution systems like Netflix or Hulu, you're not getting deluged with commercials, you're getting your programming. So with that, I'll just open it up. We can chat, talk a little bit about what's happening. I'll sit down. Thank you.
So, when we ask students to make a PowerPoint presentation, sometimes they come to class and say, oh, I can't get the disc to work, or I can't get the pen to work. So I'll be requesting a copy of the slate.
There we go. There it is. There it is. Look at that. Oh,
Have a seat.
I had a great chart here.
Let's pass the conversation. Let's turn the spotlight to you just a little bit, if you don't mind. So you're an attorney. You sit in the city, you told me below. How did you, what's your career, how did you get there, where did you go to school?
Okay, so my road to getting into law was somewhat convoluted, kind of like my life in general. I went to law school at the University of Miami after I finished college at Georgia Tech, and went to basically the law school so I didn't have to get a job. Because I thought, boy, Miami, great beaches, okay, that buys me 3 more years of growing up a little bit. So I spent 3 years and always had this connection with sports. I had played football at Georgia Tech, and so after I graduated with my law degree and I passed the bar, instead of going into a law firm, I went back to Georgia Tech as an associate athletic director and focused primarily on negotiating all the TV deals for football and basketball. So after doing that for 7 or 8 years, and then trying to decide, do I want to stay in athletic administration or go back to be a full-time lawyer, I decided to go back to full-time things I want, but having done all these negotiations for sports TV deals, I ended up with a firm in Logan that, you know, does TV and media and everything, and so that kind of brought me full circle. And so today, you know, I represent a number of colleges, a number of professional sports teams, and a bunch of athletes in just doing all their general, whether it's endorsement work for the athletes, TV rights deals for the teams and colleges, and that's what really connected me.
Did you come from Miami and out here?
I went from Miami back to Atlanta, where I was at Georgia Tech for 8 years, and then from Atlanta out here.
I'm here, yeah. And I know the name Logan, is it a large firm?
Yes, we're in Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, Nashville, because we have a big country music practice, and then internationally, I said Washington D.C., and then internationally we're in Beijing and Hong Kong.
And when you say that you specialize in sports law?
No, it's really TV. I would say media. If you, because my media work does everything from, like, I actually do the production work for the Kardashians. I do the production work for American Idol. Do the production work for The Biggest Loser, which films out here occasionally in Camarillo. And then I do a lot of sports TV deals, and then handle a fair amount of professional athletes, endorsements, and their negotiations with their teams.
Are there other people at the firm that do the
Yeah.
same work?
We have a department of about 20 lawyers who have, because you gotta have, this is the interesting thing about the media business. The media business has become so broad in terms of what's involved, that there's so many different levels of expertise that go into doing deals. Like, you clearly are creative elements, so you gotta have people that understand copyright law, trademark law, because of the creation of content that raises intellectual property issues. Then you gotta have business people that understand deal structure. Then you need tax people who understand how to maximize the tax impact of doing these deals. And then you gotta have finance people who understand, you know, what deals are too risky, what deals make sense, or maybe a different way to structure a deal so that, you know, financially it makes better sense. So in any given transaction, there might be 3 or 4 of us involved, with everybody, you know, honing in on their specialty. I'm kind of a quarterback, if you will, and using a football analogy. So I kind of get the team up to the line and then call a play and then hope to God everybody does what they're supposed to do.
I know we talked briefly, you represent the Clippers.
Mm-hmm.
Why did this businessman pay $2 billion for this team that many magazines always said worth half that price?
Oh, maybe, I mean, I thought the team was worth between 800 and 900. Because remember, when the Dodgers sold for $2 billion, they play 162 games. That's a lot of content. Clippers in the NBA played 82 games. That's half the content. So, I mean, there's only so much you can exploit. But the Clippers story is an interesting story. The guy that bought the team was a guy named Steve Ballmer, who used to be the CEO of Microsoft. He lives in Seattle. So 3 years ago, I represent the Sacramento Kings, who most of you who follow basketball know on a good day stink. And we all, we love the Maloofs and you know, who owned the team at the time, but it was clear they could not get a new arena built in Sacramento. The current arena has gone through several names. It used to be called Arco Arena. Now, let me tell you this. When you make a naming, and I didn't talk about naming rights, but when you do a naming rights deal, you're asking for millions of dollars. Like, so guess what? We had Arco. That's a huge oil company. They're throwing money. Well, the deal expires, and Arco says, we're done. What do you mean you're done? We're done. Like the Kings stink. We don't want to spend our money here. Oh, okay. So we then found a company called Power Balance, which was like a nutrition thing. and they paid a lot less for a one-year deal to do naming rights. And then when their deal expired, well, actually, it didn't expire, they went bankrupt. So that's why when I talk about you need a team, my finance guy clearly dropped the ball when he said, yeah, do a deal with these guys. He's like, well, they're in bankruptcy like 3 months later. So the next deal we made, and this is when I knew the writing was on the wall, and I don't know if anybody here knows what the arena is called today. It's called Sleep Train Arena. Now, I'm going to tell you something. You can go around the NBA and around the NHL, and there's a lot of different sponsors that have naming rights on arenas. You ain't going to find anything close to Sleep Train anywhere. And as you would expect, that deal was like nothing. So you've got an arena that is getting older by the second. You've got a team that is just, and by the way, Sacramento got hit hard with the economy and the recession, so people aren't buying season tickets. So the plan was to sell the team to Steve Ballmer, who's got tons of money, and then let him move the team to Seattle because Seattle used to have the Sonics, but the Sonics moved to Oklahoma City to become the Thunder. And people in Seattle who right now are feeling pretty good because their football team's pretty good, everybody's feeling it, was like, we love a basketball team. So we signed the deal, everything's set. We then tell the league, now when Ballmer buys the team, he's moving it to Seattle. Whoa, wait a minute, hold it. The commissioner at the time, David Stern, felt very strongly that the team should not leave Sacramento. From a tactical standpoint, and it explains why LA doesn't have a football team. The league loves to have a stalking horse. So the reason we're not going to see a professional football team in LA at any time soon, within the next decade at least, is because the NFL loves to hold LA over these other cities' heads, saying, if you don't build a new football stadium for the Rams or for the Chargers or for the Buffalo Bills, they'll move to Los Angeles, which is just a bunch of hooey. And so Stern had the same issue with Sacramento leaving to Seattle, because right now Seattle's the most viable city that the NBA can hang over other cities, saying, if you don't build an arena, they'll go to Seattle. So the last thing he wanted was someone moving the team from Sacramento to Seattle. So he basically, because it's all politics, went to the owners and threatened all the owners and said, if you vote in favor of this relocation, I'll take it out of you. And he fondly, and I say fondly, referred to me as a legal arsonist because I kept pushing, saying, we're moving the team. Well, they took a vote. Guess what? The vote didn't pass. So Ballmer said, I'll still buy the team and I'll keep it in Sacramento. And Stern said, no, we have to have local investment. We need local investment. I don't want some Seattle guy buying a team in Sacramento. It doesn't make sense. So the league got 47 investors together, led by one of the Golden State Warriors owners, and they bought the team. Steve wanted to sue the NBA. The NBA said, be patient. Your opportunity will come. And as the dominoes began to fall, and Mr. Sterling became less and less coherent, and that situation was going to happen. And when I say it was going to happen, is it was kind of like a ticking time bomb, and you knew at some point, if it wasn't now, it's going to be a year from now, he was going to do something that was going to cause the league to say, that's it, you're done, you're out. So it happened. Ballmer was at the sideline. There were all these people that said, hey, I want to buy the team, I want to buy the team, I want to buy the team. The phone call went from the NBA to Ballmer. Hey, it's yours, but you've got to really make a very compelling offer. Well, what's compelling? A big number. So the number that initially was floated was 1.5. And then
that's 1.5
billion. 1.5 billion for a team that Donald Sterling bought for a little more than 15 million in the 80s. So now it's 100-fold. And but here's what pushed it to 2 billion. Television and money. What I've been saying the whole afternoon, and I hate to sound like a broken record, but it really is TV and money. The deal that the Clippers have with Fox Sports is going to pay, because right now, if you have cable television or pay TV, Fox Sports has two networks. They have Fox Sports West and Fox Sports Prime Tape. And the teams that are on their network, they have the Clippers, contracts expired. They have the Kings, the hockey team, whose contract was just extended. And then they have the Angels, the baseball team. If the Clippers don't re-sign with Fox, Fox can't afford to have two networks. They're going to have to kill either Prime Ticket or Fox Sports West, and that will cost them hundreds of millions of dollars in lost revenue from advertisers and from the subscription fees that you pay for cable television, and they can't let that happen. So my guess is the Fox is going to pay some ridiculous amount of money, and then Ballmer sitting down and doing his pro forma said, hey, if I can get $100 million a year from Fox for 20 years, that's enough to justify paying $2 billion for this team. What it doesn't make sense, and people close to the situation are like, this doesn't make sense. The Clippers play at Staples Center. Staples Center is owned by AEG. AEG owns a piece of the Lakers. AEG owns the Kings. The Clippers are merely a tenant. And what that means in the arena business is they don't participate in any of the revenue generated by that arena. They basically sell tickets, and that's what they get. AEG keeps the money from parking, and suite sales, and premium tickets, and concessions, and that money is shared with the Kings and the Lakers, but not with the Clippers. So, ultimately, either Ballmer's going to have to force AEG to take a piece of the Clippers so they can share those revenue streams, or he's going to be looking to build a new basketball arena somewhere in Los Angeles to own, so the Clippers can participate in all this ancillary money because it's huge dollars.
What about moving to Seattle?
Never going to happen. The NBA will never let it, ever let it happen.
Even with a different commission?
Yeah, never. They can't afford to take their foot off the pedal as it relates to other cities that need new arenas. They've got to keep Seattle. The only way Seattle's going to get a basketball team that will not be by relocation, it will be by a new franchise. The NBA says, let's expand to 32 teams or 34 teams.
What's your opinion of, since you mentioned it already, of the Dodger dispute? What's going to happen?
Well, it's all about all these people that buy TV. And what we've seen happen in LA is people have said, I really don't need the Dodgers. Like, I'm not, and this is the kicker. It's like, when you look at what you watch, what you have time to watch, the Dodgers play 162 baseball games. Many of those games are on national television. They're on Fox, or they're on ESPN, or they're on Turner, and you don't need Time Warner's network to get that handful. And then, for the real diehard fans, there's radio, which is still free.
Vince Scully.
And Vince Scully. So I think what's happened is because of the competition for how we consume our entertainment media, because it's easy to say, I don't need to pay $100 a month for pay TV when I can pay $9 or $8 for Netflix and pretty much watch what I want to watch. And then, I could just take a TV with an antenna and get CBS, NBC, ABC, and Fox. And guess what? The Dodgers are going to play on Fox a handful of times each year. So I think they overplayed their hand, because I think the paid television distributors have said, we can't pay another dime in carriage rights fees, because the Dodgers network is asking $4 a subscriber. Well, best case scenario, let's say your pay TV provider says, I'll split it with my customer. Well, that adds $2 on your monthly payment bill for a Dodger channel that a lot of us aren't going to watch. It just isn't. So again, it goes back to what's really driving the programming. People want to watch the playoffs, So if the Dodgers make the playoffs, I'll find a way to watch the playoffs. But 162 games from April to September isn't compelling enough. I would rather watch, and then you list your favorite shows, and if you get those favorite shows on Hulu or on Netflix, that's where you're going to consume them.
Wasn't there a parallel back in New York with the Yes Network?
Yeah, absolutely.
They were trying to hold out.
Yeah.
Everybody carries it. Yes. What happened?
And that, the reason for that is what we call vertical integration. The Yes Network is owned by the Yankees, and the primary cable provider in New York is Cablevision, and that's the Dolan family who own the Rangers and the Knicks. So the Yankees basically said, if you don't do this, then we're not going to do that, and you guys will be shut out. So they made peace because they had joint interests. Time Warner doesn't have that here in Los Angeles because Time Warner is basically a direct competitor of Fox. Fox doesn't care. It's like they would just assume Time Warner go away because at the end of the day, Fox has distribution deals with other distributors in Los Angeles. And although Time Warner has a million or so households, people can still get everything on DirecTV, Dish, AT&T, Verizon, Charter, Fox, Comcast. What's the primary cable carrier out here in Canada? Is it Comcast? DirecTV?
Verizon.
Oh, Time Warner. So many of you can get the Dodgers if you've got Time Warner. But for those who have Direct or Dish or AT&T, you're not getting it. And you know what? Nobody's really complaining. The politicians would like to make it an issue. I want to go to Congress and I want to force the FCC to arbitrate this, but that's all just to get reelected. I'm sure they really care about. It's really not it's not a good business decision because I just don't know that $4 a month to be able to get a network that distributes the Dodgers, and I'm only going to watch a handful of games makes sense.
I want to take you back to your earlier comment. You were explaining how the cast on these shows held out for more money because they're so tied to revenue. Why don't the athletes, since they're so important to this non-time shifted, why don't these athletes now start demanding much money?
That's a great question. And here's the difference. When you're an actor, a musician, a performer, you belong to a union. You belong to AFTRA or SAG. You belong to the AFM if you're a musician. The only thing those unions negotiate for you is scale wages, pension, health and welfare, meal breaks, and residuals. Residuals means when a show is rerun, or if it's distributed internationally, you get, or if it goes out on home video, or other streaming, other alternative distribution means, you get money for that. That's all they do. You are at an arm's length, open market, free negotiation. And it's not that way in sports. In sports, the collective bargaining agreements that all the professional leagues have basically restrict you. There is no such thing as a free agent. Even after you've been in the league for a number of years and you get what's called restricted or unrestricted free agent status, you're still not a free agent. There still are procedures that are in place to protect your current team from you leaving. So unlike with an actor who could say, I'm not coming in. I have an arm's length negotiation. Oh, okay, so I can't do another sitcom? I'll go do a talk show because you can't stop me from doing a talk show. You may be able to stop me from doing another sitcom. As a professional athlete, you don't get to say, I'm leaving, I'm going to play for this team because the collective bargaining agreements of the leagues restrict the ability of the athletes to move, which is why, like in the NBA, you can offer sheets and then you can match it. And so someone who's a restricted free agent has an obligation to negotiate with his existing team before he can even look elsewhere, and he can't look elsewhere unless certain parameters are met. And it's basically a monopoly.
But if the players are essential to the product, and obviously they have money to buy union representation, why don't they change those agreements?
And they've tried. That's why, if anybody remembers, we had the lockout in basketball. We had football with a lockout, where the collective bargaining units sit down and say, we want these changes, but the owners are too powerful. And the reason is because there are a lot of great athletes, You think about how many college athletes never make it to the pros. So, and it's not just replacement players, but there's so much talent out there that if these guys don't want to agree to this, there's plenty of people out there that will, which is why on the entertainment, the acting side, the unions have been smart to say, how many people are trying to break into acting? You know, if we try to play hardball with the studios on these collective bargaining deals, there's plenty of people that'll go work that don't belong to the union. So they, on the acting and the music side, I think the unions have been a lot more aware of the collective strength that the studios have as opposed to what the actors have, as opposed to in professional sports, you've got players who are completely dependent on what the owners decide. And this is why you've seen turnover with the presidents of the players' unions. I mean, they keep firing presidents of the player associations left and right because everybody thinks that they're not doing a good job, but there's just so much power amongst sports league ownership. It's the balance is heavily weighted in favor of the teams.
Let's talk about actually another imbalance in the student athlete in the NCAA and universities. Of course, they're making millions off these young people. Is that going to change, or do you think that's going to stay?
It's slowly changing. This past year, we've now seen the powerhouse conferences separate from the NCAA's general population. Yeah, it's the ACC, the SEC, the Big Ten, the Pac-12, and the Big 12 have now gotten, like, you know, preferred citizen status where they can pay for more than just what the recognized costs of education are. So under the current NCAA model, the only thing student athletes are entitled to are room, board, tuition, fees. So they got to figure out how to eat. You know, okay, we have a training table for our athletes. Well, what do you do on a weekend? So when they travel, they're entitled to a per diem, but that still doesn't, if they want to go out, they can't get money. So what the Big Five said was, look, if you're just a regular student, your parents are sending you, yeah, they're paying for your tuition, your books, your fees, you know, your room and board, but they're sending you a little bit of something, like for going out. So let's figure out what that number is and give it to the student athletes. So in those Big Five conferences, they'll start getting a little bit more money. All the lawsuits over the use of name and likeness have now been consolidated, and there will be a fund established because when, you know, fantasy football, all this stuff, there's all this money coming in from exploiting the players. They're going to put that in a fund so that after you finish your college as a student athlete, you'll be entitled to access some money from this fund. How much is still up for grabs, but it's going to be nothing near what the universities do. You know, and the universities will tell you, and rightfully so, well, you're getting an education, and that's invaluable, and it is. But there are certain, you know, there are certain things that are going on that, you know, on the balance of fairness, we'd say, well, if you can use my name and my likeness and generate millions of dollars, you know, for the university, then why shouldn't I get a little bit of that? And that's where the debate is headed.
What was your position at Georgia Tech?
I was the associate athletic director, and I oversaw NCAA compliance and corporate sponsorships.
And before that, you were an athlete?
And before that, I played there, and then became a lawyer, and then went back there as a lawyer, former athlete. So, you
I'm trying
know.
to take you way back. So obviously you were a lawyer, excuse me, you were an athlete in high school.
Yes.
Were you recruited to Georgia Tech?
Yes.
So in that time, in fact, did you feel exploited?
Oh, we all did. Oh, no. Let me tell you something. By the way, actors and actresses, you're exploited. That's why there's all this litigation against studios and you know, for one of the deals in acting deals is sometimes you get back in, you know, like participation. And some of these shows make tons of money out in syndication and internationally, and then you get your accounting statement that shows that you're still upside down. It's like, that can't be. And so there's all this litigation because the studios use what we call this creative math and accounting to show that everything's losing money. It's not. So as a player, you're going, you know, they expect me to be in film session at 6 a.m. before I go to breakfast, to go to school, and then come back for practice, and then film after practice, and then I'm supposed to study, and then get 5 hours of sleep, you know. So it is. Everybody has always felt exploited, and the rules are changing slowly as to now there's a mandated, you know, 1 day off a week. So whatever your sport is, they got to give you 1 day when you don't have your sport. But conveniently, coaches will find a way to say, well, there's no meeting, but you know, you guys should kind of get together and talk about it. You know, so it's this ongoing game that you play. The number of hours for practice has been restricted, you know, to try to give student athletes a life and a chance to be students, but it's still, again, you want to talk about the balance of power, it's still very much a one-sided equation.
I want to leave time for the audience fascinating discussion. So come up to the microphone, if you will, and I remind you gently, it's not your time to give a talk. We have a speaker. It's your time to ask a question. So it's short, you could identify yourself if you will.
Very knowledgeable about what you do. What are some of the things that the students here can do to prepare them for that first real full-time job out in the business world, especially juniors and seniors? What are the things that would help them?
Oh, let me tell you, you know, how many times do young graduates hear, well, we're looking for somebody with experience. Well, how do I get experience if you won't hire me? You know, I got to get hired myself to get experience. So, and I can tell you, because my process started early, I tried to consume as much information about this area. So, before I even was like applying for a job or thinking about it, I was reading and like anything that was topical about TV deals, you know, stuff that goes beyond the classroom. So, you know, to the extent that you can go hang out or intern, which is something that, you know, I've been talking to the school here about, to get as much free knowledge, practical knowledge is incredible. And in terms of adding on to the education you're getting is that understanding of, you know, what's going on. And the good news is, you know, with Google today, you can pretty much consume, you know, a lot of stuff, because everything between social media, you know, everybody's talking about everything. And so to those that are interested in acting or writing, directing, producing, I would just be using, you know, your tablets, you know, Macs, smartphones, to just read about as much stuff as you can read about that's going on in our business. You know, the same thing on the business side. If you're thinking about, you know, executive, agent, whatever, just get as much as you can from what's actually happening. It's invaluable in terms of saying, oh, well, I saw, like, you know, the whole thing with the cast of Big Bang was very public, you know, and for those coming into business, that stuff's fascinating, because the strategy of the studio ultimately saying, all right, we're going to offer the first 4 who step up this deal as a way to try to lock them out. And it's like, so you learn that tactic and you see what's going on.
Thank you.
What happened there? Did they take the top 4 actors?
Well, what happened was, then the actors rallied and said, no, the top 4 will not sign unless we all sign. And guess what happened? It was like, all right, we're here, you're here. Doesn't take an algebra major to say, well, why don't we end up here and be done? And that's exactly what happened.
Yes, sir.
Can you envision a future where there's live sport deals with Netflix and Hulu and stuff?
Yes, great question, absolutely. Because, do you remember how Netflix started? You remember well, shoot, you guys are.
The red on the
The red envelope, I mean, I still remember, like, you'd go down your list, go, oh, I want that movie. And then they ship it to you, and it was still, you know, at least it was on DVD, which was a heck of a lot better than tape, you know. But Netflix had a plan to say, well, we envision a digital world where, like, stuff, it's all here, you just grab it, you know. So yes, because they will ultimately pay for what the rights that they can deliver, as opposed to these cable channels, which, again, TBS is airing Major League Baseball. TBS is sitcoms and, stupid dramas and stuff like that. They got baseball. So yeah, I think that's exactly what I'm saying. Or streaming. ESPN Go, all this stuff is going to become, this is how you're going to watch everything.
Thank you.
I can't believe there aren't more questions. You gave an excellent presentation. You brought up something in the answer to the last question that made me think about what about net neutrality and the FCC? That's thing number one. And thing number two, creativity. I come from a marketing background. I have an undergraduate degree in engineering, and I also have an MBA. What I see our young people wasting their time on is trying to make teeny little ads for your cell phone. Do you ever see us not just selling crap? Because that is what this country does well. PR and marketing and selling, and that's all we seem to do anymore. We're not solving the serious problems that we have in the United States and around the world.
What's the question, please?
The question is, do you ever see us not focusing on just little ads on little devices?
No, and the reason is because you're always going to be an ad-based generated platform indeed. It's too cost prohibitive to say, we're going to pass 100% of the cost on to a consumer who will pay for. That's why YouTube is so successful. And by the way, we're doing a lot of production for originals for YouTube. Like when people go out and become popular, say, get that guy signed, let's do a whole thing, because it's about supply and demand. People love to consume this stuff, and it's free. It goes back to the original TV model. The original TV model in the 50s was free.
Pence, right?
Yep. So it's always going to be ad supported, and the advertisers are always looking for the hook. And the hook could be, some kid in a dorm room with a computer and a ukulele, and people are like, with a monkey on a unicycle, it's unbelievable. And that's kind of how the business is being driven.
All right, and then the first question, which had to do with net neutrality and bringing in Netflix and streaming it as
Yes.
opposed to the CDs or the DVDs.
This is going to be an issue the FCC is going to address because I don't know if you guys follow mergers and everything, but you've got huge mergers getting ready to go on, with Comcast and AT&T and Time Warner, and everything is consolidating. So you've got content producers, which also own distribution channels. And so the FCC is, again, going to be faced with, if we're going to continue to see these huge companies consolidate, then we've got to open up the airwaves, the internet and digital airwaves the way, business in general is finding less and less regulation in favor of more and more deregulation.
Well, and then that brings us obviously to antitrust and how can we fight against the oligarchs who are basically taking over, whether it's the media or the sports, as you were talking about, that there are far fewer people that they have to control versus all of the sports players.
And what's happened is, when you look back to like when the U.S. left England, and they came over, by the way, for those of you who were around, they came over on boats, they were on airplanes, so they sailed, and there was this thing called the United States Constitution. And the Constitution, which was relevant in 1776, is still relevant today in 2014, but it's being interpreted consistent with today's standards. So the concept of antitrust, which for those of you who have been forced to take any kind of a law business class, comes out of the Commerce Clause of the Constitution, it's evolving. And our Supreme Court, although still fairly conservative, so pro-business, is being forced every time. There's a case right now going on that I'm involved in San Jose over whether or not Major League Baseball, which is the only professional sports league that has an exemption for antitrust, whether they should be able to say to the Oakland A's, you cannot move to San Jose. The A's have been trying to get out of Oakland. Again, if anybody here is from Oakland, I apologize, but nobody wants to be in Oakland.
But they have Bart, they
Okay.
get right there to the stadium.
They want out so badly, so they cut a deal with the city of San Jose, which is, now you've got the 49ers moved out of San Francisco, they're in Santa Clara, so this is like, oh, we'll go to San Jose. Major League Baseball said, you can't. What do you mean we can't? You can't, because we get to say, by the way, we have an antitrust exemption that the Supreme Court gave them back in the early 1900s. So this case that's before the Ninth Circuit right now is arguing undo the antitrust exemption, because today isn't the way it was in the 1930s. So it's evolved.
I
Thank you.
hope it's all-
Next question, please.
Hi, my name's Paul, I'm a business student here, and so you mentioned there's a future with Netflix and sports. Do you
Yeah.
think that would be the end of cable providers, since that's like the string holding them up, since it's like a video on demand society?
No, I think that's where we're headed, is to a video on demand. Either subscription, video on demand, Netflix, or just video on demand, where everything is available whenever it's available. I mean, think about it. When I'll use a restaurant analogy. When you go to a restaurant, it's like, in the old days, it's like, well, I want eggs. Well, you've got to be here before 11 because that's our breakfast. No, nobody does that anymore. It's like everybody has a menu, and you just pick off the menu. It's like, this is what I have a taste for right now. So what's happening in the way we consume media is it's no longer about, well, if you want this, you have to be sitting here now, as opposed to, I want it whenever I want it. And that is classic video on demand, subscription video on demand. And the networks are going to have to adjust. Everybody's going to have to adjust to the fact that with digital technology, there is absolutely no excuse for not having everything available. I mean, nobody tells you when you can get music. You get music wherever you want to get, you listen to it. And that's the way we're headed.
Also, what position did you play in college?
I was a quarterback. So, yeah.
Surprise, surprise.
That's why the blonde hair.
So we'll take these three men that are standing right here for questions.
Is there any conceivable way that LA could have an NFL team?
Expansion.
Yeah.
And Goodell, by the way, Goodell may not be the commissioner of the NFL in another month or two. Yeah, it's going to be expansion. I don't think the NFL is going to let a team relocate. That's not good for the league. And you saw what happened. Buffalo just was purchased, and the first thing was we're staying in Buffalo. Again, no offense to anybody from Buffalo, but you don't want to be in Buffalo. Okay? And they're staying. Because the fan base, every city has a fan base. And although the Davis family was successful having the Raiders come here, they go back there, they go right here, under the current way that the NFL does business, there is very unlikely to have a team relocate here. It would have, the relocation fee would be so big, you might as well just wait for an expansion franchise.
Thanks. Hi, Scott. Thank you for coming out. I really appreciate you coming, actually talking with us today. My question is regarding purpose and where you kind of derive your purpose from in your career, and like what keeps you going day to day and what you actually do. I don't know if that's going to be able to be summed up in a couple of minutes.
Well, I'll say this, and everyone in here who's graduating this year, next year, whatever, purpose is all about getting up in the morning and just being excited to go do what you're going to do. And how you find that, I mean, and I'll tell all of you, you may not find it till you're in your 30s. I mean, like, I was like a rudderless ship. I was a little irresponsible, a tad of a troublemaker, and it took a while for me to figure out this is what I really want to do. But once you get it, then it's like you're off to the races. So it starts with, when you get up in the morning, just, you really want to be doing something that you're fired up to do, and it may take a while because you've got to experience life before you really know what you're looking for. Education is critical because it helps you develop your mind. We have to learn stuff, and then we have to learn how to think. And then once we learn stuff and learn how to think, then it's really more of what do I really, not what do I see myself doing, but what do I enjoy doing? And it takes on a number of different forms. So, all of you, I encourage, education is a continuing process. It does not end when you walk and you get your cap and gown and get your diploma. And most of you, hopefully, there will actually be like a seal and a signature on your diploma, unlike mine, which was a blank piece of paper, until I, satisfied the necessary requirements. But yeah, I mean, it's ongoing. So take this university experience and understand this is just the beginning of the journey.
Thank you.
Cool. I have a question in regards to sports. It seems to me you had brushed up on athletes. To me, it seems like certain athletes are starting to get paid a lot more because they're starting to become a lot more globalized.
Right.
And you see kind of idolization throughout just everywhere now, where China is almost worshiping certain athletes that we have here. And we're now negotiating. I think Carmelo Anthony just signed $130 million. Kershaw's coming up $200 million. So what kind of effect does that have when you're trying to kind of sign these teams when now these players are making, $200 million in the course of a couple of years? How do you go about when you're trying to kind of purchase or to buy the rights to the team? What does that look like?
It all goes back to TV again. And the reason is because when you have popular athletes, people love to watch popular athletes. I mean, the Dodgers are very fortunate. Clayton Kershaw is one of the most popular professional athletes around. And so you pay for that because ultimately that drives people come to the ballpark. I mean, listen, TV isn't what it is. You still got to have people in the ballpark. You can't underscore the value of people filling the seats, consuming your concessions, paying for your parking. But I want to just touch on one thing that's evolved with professional athletes. Unlike 20 years ago when a professional athlete was basically, I have a 4, 5, 6, 7-year career maybe, and I got to make as much money as I can. Now, professional athletes have become their own brands. And I'm very fortunate to work with 3 very high-profile guys who make more money on their endorsements than they do playing for their teams because they become these iconic figures that sponsors, again, go back to the advertisers, they want to pay a ton of money to be associated with these guys. And we are building their futures based on our expectation that when their playing careers are over, they will still be ambassadors for these brands. And they will still have value to connect with these brands. That's where I think what professional sports does is it's a stepping stone for these guys to then get into the second phase of their careers, which is becoming their own brands.
I have the last question. Why did you join the CSU Chandler's Foundation?
Oh, great question. And I hate to simplify it, but the L rate. No, I'm just kidding. So I spent a lot of time in Ventura. I've got a very dear friend who's a manager and owns a restaurant in Ventura. And he kind of introduced me to this. And so I was like, oh, okay, we're going to Ventura, then we'll go do this, and we'll see this. And it was very exciting for me to see a school that is really new. Like, this place has not been around that long. With all this energy, and having been on in an administration at a major university, I thought, man, you know what? I always enjoyed that. This is cool. I love the fact that people are here, students are here really yearning to get educations, and that's cool, because when you do what I do, nobody's really thinking about education, they're all just thinking about money, and so this is refreshing. So when my buddy, who's on the foundation, said, hey, would you be interested in this? I'm like, heck yeah, this is, because it's really not that tough of a drive to get out here from LA, and I can hang out, and it's refreshing. I love the energy, I love the fact that your student body is comprised of these just energetic, passionate young people that are looking to launch their futures. And if I can just touch, 1 or 2 lives by hanging out, then I feel like that's a good day, So I'm really happy to be here. I'm glad you guys invited me. And I really encourage all of you, there it is, low below. Just look me up, pop me an email if you guys ever have questions about what you're thinking of doing. I always respond to my email. This thing never leaves me. And I'm just really, really excited for like the next chapter for everybody here. And, you know, I hope you guys can have as much excitement and enthusiasm and passion as I've experienced, because it's a riot to have a job. It's great.
Thank you very much for coming. So as a state school, we have spared no expense in this bag and some goodies inside. So thank you.